Hello, everybody.
Classic.
Welcome to another episode of Dirt Nap City, the podcast about interesting dead people. I'm Alex. I'm here with my friend Kelly. What's going on, Kelly?
Man, I'm just enjoying all this beautiful weather we've had recently. And we're actually having a garage sale this weekend. That's kind of a big deal. Haven't done one in a couple years. Like to purge some stuff out of the garage. You ever have garage sales?
No, we have the opposite of a garage sale. We look like we've purchased 10 garage sales in our house.
Oh, so you go to garage sales and buy people's stuff.
No, we don't. We don't, but it looks like we do.
I was looking for a 100-disc CD changer. Do you have one of those?
I actually do. I'll give it to you first.
How close to it are you?
I'm about 15 feet away, but how much would you charge for something like that?
Dude, here's the thing. For me personally, I look at it as somebody's paying me to haul away my junk, right? Stuff that I don't need and freeing up space in my house or my garage or my office or whatever. And so I'm very, very negotiable and cheap on garage sale stuff. Whereas other people I garage sale with tend to think of what they paid for it originally and base their price on that. But dude, if you come to me, especially if you come later in the day, like first right out of the gate, like let's say I have a 720p television, right? It's a flat screen, but it's an older flat screen. And I'm asking $20 for it. You know, that's not bad. Somebody comes in and offers me $2 for it. I'm going to say no. But what I'll say is, especially if it's early in the morning, I'm going to say, come back at noon. And if it's still here, you can have it for $2.
Wow, yeah. Wow, you are. Now, if I just could I just take a tour through your house and just grab stuff and buy that too? Is everything for sale or just the stuff on the lawn?
It's called a garage sale.
All right.
It's only stuff in the garage or in front of the garage.
Okay.
But we've definitely like cleared the house of some stuff. It's not 100%, but that's what I'm doing this weekend, and I hope the weather holds out.
All right. Well, good for you. I hope it works out. I hope you make tens of dollars on that.
I think I'll probably hand out Dirt Nap City stickers to everybody too.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, just here you go.
Today's subject was actually somebody that I did get as a request from your son.
Interesting.
It was already on my list of people to do, but maybe he bumped it up a little. And it's the person who, when I ask ChatGPT who we should do, always comes up in the top 5 of people that it suggests.
Okay. Is he a politician or what's his lane?
Well, you made one fatal assumption there when you said he.
What's her lane?
Okay. She is a 20th century icon. As you know, I like the 20th century. 20th century icon, born in 1897, so just missed being born in the 20th century. Born in 1897 in Atchison, Kansas.
All right, 1897. So she must have been maybe. What year did she die?
She died in 1937, we think.
Oh, are we talking about Amelia Earhart?
We are.
Wow.
Talking about Amelia Earhart. Do you know much about her?
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, very interesting woman. Like I said, 20th century icon, probably at one point, maybe one of the most famous people in the United States. Shades of Babe Dietrichson, Zaharias as just being kind of a feminist icon, a woman that people looked up to as somebody that could do things just as well as men, and just kind of an overall badass at the time. Have you seen the movie that just came out called Naiad?
No, I've not even heard of it.
It's about Diana Naiad, the woman who swam from
English Channel?
No, from Florida to the Bahamas.
What?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, and there's a movie out right now.
Like in theaters or on streaming services?
Yeah, sure. It's up for Academy Awards this year. Anyways, Her story kind of reminds me of Amelia Earhart. Just has this goal and just keeps kind of trying to get it. And I'd recommend that movie if you're interested in that type of thing.
Awesome.
So Amelia Earhart, like I said, was born in 1897, and she was raised kind of as a what they call back then tomboys. We don't hear that term that much anymore, but
No, it's kind of a dead end.
yeah, maybe we should do that one day on our dead ends series. But she was raised to not be just a nice little girl and be adventurous. Um, doing things like setting up ramps on her roof, and taking a sled and flying off of it. Just very adventurous person. Um, and but beyond that, kind of a relatively didn't didn't do a lot of notable things in her childhood. But in 1917, during Christmas vacation, she visited her sister in Toronto. World War I was going on, and she saw soldiers coming back from World War I, and so she volunteered with the Red Cross.
Don't tell me she was an ambulance
She
driver.
was not. She was a nurse's aide. Yeah,
Okay.
ambulance driver seems to be kind of the back door into Dirt Nap City.
Yes.
Um, but she worked as a nurse's aide in a hospital, and she would hear these stories about pilots about flying in World War I. And now, remember, just to give you a little context here, the Wright brothers' first flight was like
1903.
1903 exactly.
Yeah.
So this was 1917. So this would be kind of the equivalent of today talking about like smartphones, or
Yeah. They had
something.
been around for a little while, but still not
Just
quite,
very, very new. And here where there was a war and people were flying in the war, right? But commercial flight wasn't that common or anything. And flying was really, really new. Like I said, 15, it was only 13 years earlier, 14 years earlier where the first people ever flew. So that's a big jump from where we were. So this was a new thing. So she would hear these stories about these different war pilots. Well, um, like I said, she worked in this hospital. Well, the next year, 1918, you know what happened in 1918 was the pandemic.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and she got it. She got it. She was one of the first people to get that Spanish flu, and she got it pretty bad. She had bad headaches, and she was laid up for like a year. And then throughout her life, she kind of had these sinus issues that every now and then she'd have to go get surgery on or taken care of. Um, but she was laid up for about a year. When she came out of that, she couldn't shake that thing about going to. She wanted to go to an air show, so her father took her to an air show in Long Beach. Long Beach, where I think we had talked about Howard Hughes.
Yeah, that's
With
where he,
the
taxied and
sure
briefly lifted off the Spruce Goose,
Spruce
or
Goose,
the
right?
Hercules, as it was actually known.
Right. You got mad, I think, when I called it the Spruce Goose before, but
I was channeling Howard Hughes.
so she went to this air show, 1920, and the next day she convinced her dad to pay for her to do a passenger flight. Now, back then, passenger flights were really uncommon, and it's kind of like probably like going skydiving today, right? So she paid $10 for 10 minutes. That's about the equivalent of about 160 bucks today. So $10 for 10 minutes. This guy would take her up in the plane, and she was hooked. She wanted to do more and more and more. She begged her parents to, like she was a grown woman, but still, she didn't have any money. Uh, I guess they did have a little bit of money, but they weren't poor. But she
Wait,
begged her.
where did they live? Where was she from?
Well, she grew up in
Oh,
Kansas and
Kansas.
in
Okay,
Iowa, and spent a lot of time in Iowa. At this time, they were in California. Uh,
okay.
and the deal with her parents was that she could fly, or she could learn how to fly, but only a woman could teach her how to fly. So she found this woman named Nita Hooks. Uh,
That's a cool name.
her nickname was Snooky.
That's even cooler.
Pre Jersey Shore Snooky. In fact, Snooky was about the same age as Amelia, but she lived till 1991.
Wow.
So she lived to be an old woman of 96, and she wrote a book actually called I Taught Amelia to Fly. And
Wow.
the initial deal there was $500 for 12 hours as an instructor, but they ended up they ended up becoming friends. So she gave her a lot of free lessons. She saved about $1,000 doing different odd jobs and paid Snooky um, uh, a lot of this money. And she took her first lesson in January of 1921. And it wasn't easy even getting to the airfield. She'd have to take a bus and then walk 4 miles just to get to the airport every day to do this. But she was hooked, like I said. 6 months later, she bought her first plane. You know, like a lot of these stories, these 20th century stories we tell, it's like somebody tries something, and then 6 months later they're the head of something, or they're just
Yeah,
doing it full
yeah,
fledged, or they're famous or something. Things
yeah.
don't work that swiftly these days. But 6 months later, she bought a plane. It was a bright yellow biplane that she called the Canary. And by October 2022, so her first lesson was January 21. By October of 2022, she flew to 14,000 feet, which was a world record for women. But this was
Wow.
a time where not many women were doing this.
And there was no canopy, right? I mean, this is an open biplane?
She was the 16th woman in the US to be issued a pilot's license. So pretty much every
Wow.
time she goes in the air, she's setting some kind of record. And not just record for women, but sometimes, doing things that a lot of people hadn't done, just because, this flying had been around for 20 years. Um, so she got a little notoriety by doing things like that, breaking these altitude records. And like you said, there was probably no canopy, so going high was probably couldn't go to 60,000 feet if you wanted to. It was just not pressurized or anything like that. Well, in 1927, that was when Charles Lindbergh did his solo flight across the Atlantic. And that was, that captivated the US. And and then they were gonna have a woman do that next. Well, actually the idea was to not have a woman fly solo across the Atlantic, but just be flown across the Atlantic. And this woman, Amy Guest, was gonna do it, and she got cold feet, and she said, "I'm not gonna do this, but we got to find the right woman with the right image to do this."
You mean be flown as in be a passenger?
Yes, so that's exactly what happened in 1928. Two guys, Wilmer Stoltz and Lewis Gordon, flew from Newfoundland to Wales, and that's kind of the shortest distance between U.S. and across the Atlantic. Right, Newfoundland's about as
Okay,
far
yeah.
east as you can get in North America, and Wales is pretty far west. Um, so those two guys, and with Amelia Earhart as a passenger, and in her words, she was like baggage, like a sack of potatoes. She wasn't happy with this, but they did it. And if you
Yeah.
go to Wales, there's a plaque that says that Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, which is true. She flew, but she didn't do any of the piloting. She just rode like a sack of potatoes. How long do you think that flight took from Newfoundland to Wales in 1928?
Let's see, it's probably about I'm gonna say 16 hours.
Took 20 hours and 40 minutes. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
wow.
I think that flight nowadays might be like 6 hours or something. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Uh, but even though she wasn't happy and she thought she was a sack of potatoes, she was treated like a hero. When she came back, they had a ticker tape parade. She got to meet the president, President Coolidge at the time. And while she was I guess she flew from Wales, then she flew on to England. And while she was there, she bought a plane owned by an Irish pilot, a woman pilot named Mary Heath, who was the first British pilot, and she had that plane shipped back to the U.S. So she was acquiring planes. She was just all in, and she had big ideas for the future. But she kind of looked like Charles Lindbergh, and he was called Lucky Lindy. I don't know if you knew that was his nickname. And then
I have heard that, yes.
and she was they called her Lady Lindy, which is a little
Late
insulting, I think. So
Yeah, yeah,
she
yeah,
was kind
not
of always in his shadow. They also called her Queen of the Air, which is, I think, a much cooler name, Queen of the Air. And the other thing she started doing was promoting products. The advertising executives really saw something in her. She started doing ads for things like Lucky Strike cigarettes.
of course.
But actually, that actually cost her. I think she was supposed to do a magazine uh, spread with McCall's, and they canceled it after they saw the Lucky Strike ad. But they wanted a certain image, but she started selling a women's clothing line at Macy's. She had her own kind of wrinkle-proof, washable clothing line, and it was really important to her that, like, well, women all over the U.S. started dressing like her and
Comfortable
wanting.
shoes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She was, like I said, she was a kind of a badass at the time. She was also a luggage. There was a luggage line, which totally makes sense, right?
So she was an early, a social media influencer.
I wouldn't say social media, but sure. I mean, she became this associate editor at Cosmopolitan. I mean, she was a woman that people
What?
were look, yeah, yeah, why not? She worked for TWA, the early versions of TWA to promote air travel. I mean, while they were doing this, they were getting commercial air travel off the ground. So they were afraid that women would be afraid to do this. So she worked at TWA, tried to promote women's travel.
It's as easy as being a sack of potatoes.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if that was the
That was their
line that
first
they.
advertising
Yeah,
line.
that's bad line. But I'm sure there was a lot of. I mean, I'm not sure if I was around in the 1920s if I would have been all in on commercial air travel.
I guess it would almost be like today, if you had the opportunity, if money weren't a problem, would you go up into space?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Okay, then you probably wouldn't have flown on a plane back then.
I'm not sure it's that similar because I mean, only like billionaires can do that now, or
I just said if money were no object.
oh, right, right, right. But I think this was like TWA was trying to get, rich, but not that rich. Not
But you said the barrier was gonna be fear, right? And that was part of what she was trying to do was say, "It's safe. It's safer than driving your car. It's safer than this. It's safer than that." Um, it's I don't know, I think I would feel um, more safe going up into space than I would going down into, like, an Explorer submarine, with that catastrophe.
I might compare it more to like getting in a driverless car today. Like,
Mm.
in some cities, like I think Phoenix has Ubers that
Yeah,
are
yeah. Yeah,
driverless,
my
right?
daughter's been in one. She said it was pretty good experience.
Yeah, so I think that's more they're trying to adopt this where everybody's gonna do it in a couple of decades, but the first adopters are gonna be the ones that really have to, tackle that fear. So, yeah.
So easy a sack of potatoes can do it is not how they did it. That wasn't their tagline.
When your daughter did that, was it cheap or was it expensive or was it the same as a regular she do it like a Uber?
I know she's at, school in Arizona, in Phoenix, and, she said there's I forget the name of it. It's a different brand name. It's not Uber. It's got another brand name that they have for these driverless cars. It will take you places. It's like an Uber, but there's no driver.
Mhm. And it rides on regular roads and
Yeah,
freeways
yeah, we
and
saw it.
everything?
I've been out there a couple times, and I've seen them driving around.
Yeah, is it weird?
It's weird. It's weird to see a car go by with no driver in the seat.
Yeah, that is strange, but that's probably what it was like because, I mean, looking back, I mean, it was just natural that that was gonna happen, but they had to have the first people doing that. So anyways, 1928, she becomes the first woman to fly solo across North America and back, and back. So she flew coast to coast and back, New York to LA, or I don't know exactly which cities it was, but basically, coast to coast and back. In 1931, she set another world altitude record of 18,400 feet. I'm not sure if there was a canopy, or what the situation was at that point, but we're getting higher and higher here. And in 1932, she was going to fly from Newfoundland to Paris. She actually landed in Northern Ireland, in a farmer's yard, and he said, "Wow, have you come far?" And she said, "Yeah, from America." That was a big deal, though. 14
Yeah,
hours
yeah,
and 56 minutes. So she's, just in a few years, you see how that time has really gone
yeah,
down. Shaved 5 hours off of that time. She became friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, past the
yep.
subject of Dirtnap City. Eleanor Roosevelt, she actually convinced Eleanor Roosevelt to take up flying. She never got past a student permit. She never was able to fly by herself. She quit. But they became good friends, and that was kind of all the rage back then, was to be like Amelia Earhart. Well, in 1935, so now she's 38 years old. She became the first ever to fly solo from Honolulu to Oakland. Okay.
Oh, wow.
That's a long ways, right?
That is
That's
a long way.
if you look on a map, if you look on a globe or a map and you see where Hawaii is, it's just a little speck in the middle of the ocean, right? Just between the U.S. and Australia. You can't even really see it on a globe. It's so tiny.
What's amazing, even beyond just the actual piloting, because I would imagine that was probably pretty monotonous once you're up in the air. You're just kind of holding the stick and making sure you stay at an altitude. It's the navigation, right?
Right.
Because they didn't have GPS, they didn't have computers, they didn't have anything. They're navigating by charts. And just real quick, I've been watching this show on Apple. Apple, it's an Apple original called Masters of the Air. Have you heard of that?
I have.
It's Tom Hanks is one of the executive producers, and it's about World War II pilots who flew the Flying Fortress. They call them the forts, and it's a great show. If you like aviation, it's it's kind of being compared to Band of Brothers. I don't think it's as good as Band of Brothers, because Band of Brothers was amazing, but it is a really interesting take, and they do focus a lot on the navigators and what a tough job they had. I mean, imagine you've got all these maps, you've got all these plot points that you're plotting, you're looking at stars, you're looking at the sun, and you're being shot at, and you're being shook around, and
No.
it's cold. As a matter of fact, one of the pilots in one of the episodes gets frostbite, pretty severe frostbite, because he has to take his coat off because he's been shot. And anyway, it's a if you like aviation, Masters of the Air, Apple, it's a
No.
good show.
And this was 10 years before that. 10.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the
So
navigation was even rougher.
yeah, yeah. She also was able to fly from solo from LA to Mexico City and Mexico City to New York. So basically, every time she's getting in a plane, she's setting a record, big on these long distance flights and getting really good at it. Some of these, she was, I think, in the one from Mexico City to New York, she said the last couple hours were so relaxing. She turned on the radio and just listened to the New York Philharmonic on the way in. It was so relaxing. So
Wow.
I don't know if that was braggadocio, but she was just really like loving this stuff. But her goal was to fly around the world. Others had done this. Other people had actually circumnavigated the globe, but the way she wanted to do it would have been the longest, because she wanted to basically follow the equator at the
Okay.
widest points of the earth. Not exactly follow the equator, but pretty much follow it.
As close as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if you think of a globe, you could fly around the world at the very top, and it's not very. You could walk around the world at the very top. Um, but the wider you get, the harder it becomes. And there's long stretches of ocean too that you have to navigate also.
Yeah.
So she was able to get the funding. She was a visiting professor at Purdue, on just um, not about anything. Uh, I don't remember what she exactly was a professor in, but she was able to get Purdue's financing to Lockheed build the plane and then Purdue pay for it. And she chose this guy named Harry Manning as her navigator, and it was just going to be the two of them. And he wasn't. He was. I think he was a ship navigator, and he had actually been the navigator on one of the ships that she took back when she flew a plane across the Atlantic. So and then they went on some test runs, and it turns out like every time they went, he'd like be off by a little bit, like by like 20 miles or something. And she's like, "Ah, I don't
Y
know about this guy."
yeah, yeah, and again, that's just shows how important the navigator is, right?
She's like, "He's not a great navigator, but he knows Morse code better than anybody." So she
There you
brought in
go.
this other guy named Fred Noonan, and he trained Pan Am pilots. Commercial air flight was starting to take off. So she figured with Noonan as the navigator and Harry Manning as the guy who would do Morse code, that would work out. So the plan was to use Noonan for the first leg from Hawaii to this place called Howland Island. Howland Island is this tiny, tiny, tiny island. But when I say fly around the world, understand that this isn't on one tank of gas. You're constantly
Yeah,
stopping and
yeah.
you're constantly stopping.
Howard Hughes had set a world record for going around the world, but he had to stop many times
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
But he didn't do it at the equator.
Right. So there's this place called Howland Island. It's this tiny, like basically a landing strip. And she was gonna fly to Howland Island from there. That's a long stretch. That's like couple of thousand miles from Hawaii to Howland Island. Then she was gonna use Harry Manning to go from there to Australia, and then she was gonna do the rest by herself.
So those guys would just parachute out. "Thanks, guys."
Yeah, they take a ship back from Australia or whatever, or wherever they
Oh,
were
oh,
going.
oh, you mean literally they weren't gonna go on with her. They were
No.
just gonna help her get from Hawaii to Australia.
Yeah, because the tough part was that stretch. I guess the navigation was really tough, and you have to hit this island.
Yeah, there's no points of reference in the ocean, it's just
Yeah,
the ocean.
and she wasn't a navigator, and she didn't know Morse code that well. I don't know. So March 1937, she takes off. She goes from Oakland to Honolulu, and it's Amelia, Harry Manning, Fred Noonan, and then she brought along this guy who was a stuntman too in Hollywood, who was her technical advisor. His name was Paul Mantz. So they go to Hawaii. They get from Oakland to Hawaii, and they get to Hawaii, and the propeller was all jacked up. They tried to go on to the next that Holland Island, but before they took off, the tire blew, landing gear collapsed, and they had to
Oh, goodness.
cancel the rest of the trip. And Harry
This was a
Manning,
Lockheed plane? This was
yeah,
made by Lockheed? Wow.
yeah, Harry Manning, the so-called navigator, the original navigator, he says, "I'm out. I'm not doing this again. You're on your own if you want to try this again." So he's out. And so that was in March of 1937. By June, they were ready to try it again. But this time, they decided to not make a big deal about it, not tell a bunch of people, because, if you don't make it, everyone's disappointed. So they go from Oakland to Miami. So now you're going the other way, right? You go to Oakland to Miami, and then it was just Amelia and Fred Noonan. And then from there, they went from Miami to South America, and then they went to Africa, and then they went to India, and then they went to Southeast Asia. By now, people are knowing that they're going to do this. But I think once they got to Miami, they said, "All right, our plan is to go around the world." So they're in New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, on June 29th, right? So it took almost a month to get there. They had 22,000 miles down, 7,000 to go. But that was the longest stretch of the trip. You had to go from New Guinea to that Howland Island, and then Howland Island to Honolulu, and then on to Oakland. But they had already done that part in reverse. So
Yeah.
basically, the part that they had to go was practically the part they had already done in reverse. It was going to take about 20 hours. So 8 hours into that flight was the last they were ever heard from.
Wow.
It was just the two of them, Amelia and Fred Noonan. Um, so there's been lots of in the almost 100 years since then. Uh, Lots of
What year was that?
speculation. That was
That was
1937. So like 90,
37. Wow.
85 years ago. Uh, there's a lot of speculation on what happened. A lot of aviation experts, a lot of divers tried to figure out what happened. Obviously, there was a lot of conspiracy theories that as something like this, when somebody just disappears, conspiracy theories come out. They had a cutter ship at Howland Island to help her out, and they were there to communicate with her. They had radio communications, and that was really frustrating. It wasn't successful. They heard her, but she couldn't hear them,
Oh,
which
so
was
she thought she didn't realize they were it's kinda like when you and I are first logging in to do our recordings, and we're making faces at each other and, tapping our headphones and microphones.
Can you imagine how awful that would have been to hear her saying things like, "We're running out of gas. We don't have much gas left. I can't hear you guys." And she would even do things like, she's like, "I'm gonna whistle. I'm gonna have a constant stream of whistle just so you can hear me." So she would
Yeah.
just whistle, and she'd be like, "I don't know why I can't hear you guys, but we're running out of gas, and I hope we can hit the island."
Turns out
Um,
her Bluetooth headset was out of battery.
Man, she didn't have much technology going on, but they think what happened was she kept circling the island and ran out of gas trying to find it. It was a very
Wow.
small spot. Also, the time zones weren't synced up. I mean, back then we didn't really, because people weren't traveling around the world very much. You can imagine that it's not like time zones were very standard.
Noonan was supposed to be a navigator? He was like
Yeah.
the better navigator?
And he was the one that had trained all those pilots. But you're in the wilderness. You're in places
Yeah.
that people hadn't been with planes before. They had just installed a new technology, a new direction system that had different bands that they could talk on, but the training wasn't real great for that, and the technology was new, and I don't know, there was somebody just said it was really poor planning and poor execution. Also, some people say that they thought they saw that when she took off, that she might have lost an antenna, which
Uh,
might have had,
explain why she
yeah,
couldn't communicate on the radio.
tons of speculation. They had exhaustive search efforts. They spent like $4 million trying to find her. They never found her. Never found Noonan. They never found the plane.
Dang.
And the water there, just to give you an idea of how much of a needle in a haystack this is, the water is 18,000 feet deep.
Dang. Okay.
So
So
it's as deep as she was high, off of
so
the ground.
and isn't 5,000 feet is a mile
Yeah,
approximately?
5,200. Yeah, yeah,
So it's about 3 miles deep, a
yeah,
little more than 3 miles deep.
yeah.
Wow.
But just a few weeks ago, as we're recording this, in late January of 2024, they think they found the plane. Just
Really?
recently, just a few weeks ago, they think they found the plane using sonar. And if they're gonna take one of those submersibles down. It's kind of like the Titanic. I mean, it's like it's as deep as that thing is.
Sitting down at the bottom of a very deep part of the ocean.
Yeah, there's this submersible company out of Charleston, South Carolina, where they think they found it using sonar. They're gonna go check it out, and if it is the her um her plane, it's within 100 miles of Howland Island.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, she was right there.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not sure what the weather was like, but I think that she just couldn't find it and she kept circling it and then she was running out of gas. They used the So remember when they take that trip before going the other way, they had 4 people there, and they only had 2 this time, so they tried to figure out how much gas they needed based on 2 fewer people, and they tried to do all these really remedial calculations compared to what you would have today, right? That would tell you the exact amount of fuel that you need. I mean, they're just estimating how much fuel they need, and they might have just not had
Not had
enough,
enough.
or
Yeah.
because they were circling so much, they might have just miscalculated it. So, in terms of the conspiracy theories, the most popular one was that the Japanese captured her or that the Japanese shot her down. I mean, this was lead up to World War II.
Yep.
This was there was some some people think that she was shot down by the Japanese. There was some people think that she was captured by the Japanese, and there was an unsolved mysteries back in the '90s where they interviewed a lady who said she witnessed her and Noonan being executed by the Japanese, but that was 2,700 miles away of where they were supposed to be. I just can't
Yeah.
imagine as slow as they were flying. I can't imagine that they would have ended up. And her last communication, she was saying, "We're running out of gas." I can't imagine she'd end up 3,000 miles away. But that was a
Unless
very,
Noonan was really, really bad.
or unless they were really good swimmers. I just can't imagine any of. But that was a very popular conspiracy theory for a while. One of my favorite conspiracy theories, though, is that she survived and moved to New Jersey and changed her name to Irene Bolam. That was actually a very popular conspiracy theory, so much more that this lady named Irene Bolam, who was actually a pilot in New Jersey, who used to run with the same crowd, used to run with Snooki and Amelia Earhart and all those people, but she looked a lot like Amelia Earhart. And in the 1970s, she kind of was at some autograph show or something. And I guess the rumor came that, that's really Amelia Earhart. And she ended up having to sue somebody for libel or slander, saying, because people wouldn't quit bothering her, saying she was really Amelia Earhart, this lady.
Wow.
So the idea that she kind of pulled an Elvis and changed her name and moved away. I think whenever somebody disappears, it's always a possibility that people want to say is, oh, they probably just got tired of the rat race and just decided to change their name. But there's no reason that she would have done that. I mean, she was trying to get a goal accomplished.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like somebody who is that close to setting a record, even if she failed and she had been rescued, it seems like she would have tried again, you know?
I don't know why people were so obsessed with that theory, but people just, want to, like I said, Elvis. There's a rumor that Elvis. Have you ever heard the rumor that Elvis is in the movie Home Alone?
No, I never have. Which
No,
one? Home Alone 3? Because that's the best.
in Home Alone 1, when the mom is standing at the airport counter with John Candy when she first meets John Candy, there's a guy.
I've
Come
never
on,
seen Home Alone,
are you serious?
but go ahead. I haven't, no.
Have we talked about this before? I thought
Siskel
you
and Ebert,
said that
yes.
you didn't
We've talked
like
about it.
it. I didn't know you hadn't seen it. So there's a guy standing in the background, and he's kind of too prominent to be an extra. He's just kind of in it a lot, but he's a portly guy. He's a tall guy, and he's got a beard, and he kind of looks like maybe like Elvis would have looked in 1990. But um, but there was a rumor that that was Elvis
Uh,
for a long time. And of course, when I watched the
nice.
movie, I can't take my eyes off that guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's your focus now.
So, in terms of a legacy for this amazing woman, Amelia Earhart, feminist icon, right? I mean, probably one of the most famous women of the 20th century, gave kind of a spirit of can do attitude in a country where that was the attitude. That was really the personality of 20th century America, was just that we could do anything if we set our mind to it. No goal is too big, and what's always amazed me is that you go in 70 years, from less than 70 years from the first flight to landing on the moon. Amazing to me.
Yeah,
Amazing to
that's
me.
amazing.
Um, but by World War II, 1,000 women were in what they called the WASPs, the Women Air Force Service Pilots. So they were mechanics, they were pilots, they
Yeah.
were taking all. And I don't know if it's in that movie or that show that you're watching.
You know, there's actually a museum for that. It's just weird coincidence. I was contacted by a lady who runs that museum, the WASP Museum, to potentially do some work for her. It never ended up happening, but I wanna say it's near Houston or somewhere in Texas?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I have to check it out.
Let
I
me
wonder
see
why
what
it would be. You gonna look it up?
museum. Yeah, National Wasp Museum, Sweetwater, Texas.
Oh, that's in near Dallas, I think,
Yeah,
or
not
West
not
Texas.
Sweetwater near Sugarland, but,
No.
Sweetwater. Yeah, that is the, Women Air Force Service pilots of World War II, and
But
it is
imagine there
in
was 1,000 women
Sweetwater.
in that, and I'm sure that Amelia Earhart was directly responsible for many, if not most of those women wanting to get into aviation. I think that's really cool.
Absolutely.
In 1967, on the 30th anniversary of Amelia Earhart's fatal flight, Anne Pellegrino flew a similar aircraft and did the same flight path and accomplished it.
Okay.
And then
Wow.
in 1997, San Antonio businesswoman named Linda Finch retraced did it again and did that.
Wow.
So I don't know if anybody's had any plans for the 100th anniversary, which is some 13 years from now, but I'll bet they do something big for her. I think it's a damn shame that her life was cut short this way, but like so many people whose life is cut short doing something so kind of heroic and tragic, the legends, the myths, all that stuff becomes even more pronounced.
Yeah, it amplifies their, legendariness, like, when they die
Yeah,
doing it.
absolutely. And like I said, she reminds me a lot of Babe Dietrichson Zaharias, and just kind of in a time where women were constantly being told they couldn't do stuff, proving them wrong. So
Nice.
kudos to Amelia Earhart.
Yeah, pour one out for Amelia.
Well, that's all I got, man.
Well, that was great. That was great. I actually only knew that she had been a pilot and she had been lost at sea, or her plane had never been found, or maybe it has at this point, but up until 2024 had never been found. And so that was great. It was right up there with the classic Dirt Nap City. Somebody you know a little bit about. They're famous. They're interesting, but you want to know more, and that's what we do here.
They've made a couple of movies about her, but nothing that's been, I don't think, too heralded. Um, so, according to Wikipedia, there's a reference to her in the Simpsons video game from about 20 years ago, where Mr. Burns had her plane shot down because said she was getting too big for her Jodspurs.
Of course, Mr. Burns, Monty.
Always comes back to the Simpsons, doesn't
You
it?
know you've made it when you're referencing the Simpsons video game.
All right, man. It's good sharing this with you.
Enjoyed it. And if you like women who broke the mold, check out Babe Dietrichson Zaharias. Check out Eleanor Roosevelt. And you can also check out Howard Hughes if you like aviators. So, lots of tangential stuff for you to check out here on Dirt Nap City.
All right, bye.
Was a ship out on the ocean, just a speck against the sky. Amelia Earhart flying out that day, with her partner Captain Noonan on the 2nd of July. Her plane fell in the ocean far away. There's a beautiful, beautiful field far away.